excited to host you for this very important discussion. But before we start, how many of us understand the conflict in the DRC? By show of hands. How many years has the conflict? So I think one of the most important things that have brought us here together is not only standing in solidarity with what's happening in the DRC, especially in the geopolitical discourse that is happening and has occurred over the last few decades. But before we get started with the nitty-gritty of the conversation, I would like to welcome one of our guest speakers. This is Bwasa. He is a Congolese solidarity activist, a teacher, and he's going to be presenting very fascinating news for us. So can you give him a round of applause?
Sorry, I'll have to move with my books so that I speak with them. Should I start? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So humbled to be here and presenting this topic about the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which you call the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But as you could see there, I prefer not to call it the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I usually call it Mama Congo. And Mama Congo for one reason. The Congo and myself, our lives are intertwined. I think you hear about the conflict in the Congo. It's 30 years, as your question you asked. In 30 years, people would say 30 years, but I usually say it's not 30 years. It's about 5 centuries. Just imagine 5 centuries of conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Some scholars, as an intro, would say that during the slave trade, 40% of the African population that was sent into slavery came from the umbilical cord of the universe, which is Mama Congo. And these people that you see in Guadeloupe and West Indies have their origin mainly from the Congo. Why the Congo? Because Congo is the center of the universe. Tancho, the land of gods or the land of the beginning. So primarily 60 years ago I was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that conflict that we're talking about is also 60 years. 5 centuries, but 60 years. And it started at that time of our independence, so-called independence, because I do not believe that we are independent. Congo has not been independent since the beginning of 1960s. We remember that 17 countries got their independence in 1960s. But there's a country that was independent prior to that. It was, which one was it? Anyone knows? The country that was independent before Congo? Ghana. Okay, and there's a country that was never colonized in Africa. Which one is it? Ethiopia. Ethiopia or Abyssinia. So it's very important to put those things into the framework of our debate and talk today. When I was asked to ask a paper, and I say a paper would not be revelatory of what we're going to talk about, because usually I'm a storyteller. I'm not an academic. I'm a storyteller. So what I do on TV as an Africa analyst, I've analyzed the topic about Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, and any other country in Africa, including our nemesis rival, the Rwanda. at the moment, because if you speak about the Rwanda today with the Congolese, would say, oh, now, conflict in Mama Congo. So, auctioneer of Dear Congo, but not Mama Congo. We have people that have put Congo on auction. And it's not now. It is since 1885. What is 1885? What does it remind you? 1885, German? Not sure. Anyone in the venue? I like having conversation. King Leopold, yes. It's a bit cold. You usually call it what? The Berlin Conference. Yes, that's the term that is being used. And a famous scholar of this campus, Dr. Adebajo, wrote The Curse of Berlin, The Curse of Africa, the Berlin Conference. But I don't call it the Berlin Conference. You know why? Because it actually was not called the Berlin Conference originally. It was called in German, Das Kongo-Konferenz ein Berliner, the Congo Conference in Berlin. So when those 14 families gathered in Berlin, it was not to discuss about how they would split Africa. It was to discuss how they will share the wealth that was in that country, Mama Congo, which at that time was called Terra Nullia in Latin. Anyone knows what is the meaning of Terra Nullia?
Empty land.
Empty land. Or the other term that was used to name Congo at that time was incognito. Incognito, which means that nobody is there. And these are things that it is very important that we extrapolate and try to understand why up until today there's a conflict in the Congo. Terra Nullia and incognito. And what happens during that time of the Berlin Conference, I'm not going to dwell on that because there's so much to be read in the media and scholarly. The reason is simple. A country that we call Belgium today, when was Belgium created? Anyone knows when was Belgium created or invented? No idea. And interesting. So until 1830, the country that is 80 times smaller than the Congo never existed. It took shape in 1830 and became officially a country in July 1831 with the willingness of two major countries at that time, colonies, France and England. Strange enough, these two countries fought for 100 years, but they agreed to create another country, which was a portion of Holland that they took. And Holland resisted, but they were defeated by the French and the British, and Belgium was born. And 30 years later, we have a king that we call King Leopold II, who presented at the so-called Berlin Conference, Das Kongo-Konferenz ein Berliner, Congo as his own property, his farm. Just imagine South Africa being a farm of one individual. And what he did, he presented that for the sake of civilization. And it is an irony, because Mama Congo is one of the greatest civilizations worldwide. The original of where science starts. Anybody has ever heard about the Ishango ball? Ishango ball? No idea? So, the Ishango ball and Lebombo. Who knows Lebombo? My dear friend and nephews, Michanas from South Africa. You know Lebombo? So that's Lebombo. That's where you have one of the oldest artifacts, mathematical artifacts. Welcome to my brother Karabishon from Congolese Solidarity Campaign. You may join me.
Serious?
Yes, mathematical artifact, but it is not structured. And the structured mathematical artifact, it is the Ishango bone, which is found in the center of the Congo, and which is at the basis and the foundation of what we call today the pyramids. So this is the civilization that King Leopold II wanted to do and civilize the people of the Congo, who were already civilized at that time, because we had our first ambassador in the Vatican. We had the king, Alfonso, who was also a Christian at that time. And these are things that are unknown to most of the people. So, fast track to that conference in Berlin. King Leopold II seized rather, a big portion of Africa, because Congo is the second largest country in Africa. Second largest in terms of the size. Algeria is first. But when we look at Algeria, it's a desert. When you look at the Congo, it's a country that has got also 60% of the fertile land, which means that if we were to push agriculture in the Congo, the entire African continent would not be suffering from starvation and famine and all the ills of the society that we speak about. Now, so you can see that already from 1884, 1885, because the conference started on the 26th November, there was already a conflict between the superpowers of that time. The Spanish, the British, the Portuguese, they were all vying what was in the Congo. And they agreed to create the International Association of the Congo. So the Terra Nullius was no longer Terra Nullius. It became an association, an organization for one man who actually dehumanized the Congolese, because it is being said, and most scholars have said, 15 million to 20 million people were killed during Leopold II. And this is not a genocide. They will never call it a genocide. They don't want to acknowledge that it was a Holocaust. Just imagine your father, your mother being cut their hands, chopped their hands, because they could not bring the quota for the harbor, which is very interesting, because Congo has been at the center of all the industrial revolutions, from the first up until the one that we're going to talk about today. So, at the stake of the Congo are today the mineral resources. And we have two giants that are fighting for those mineral resources. We have there what we call our president, Felix Tshisekedi, and alongside with them, Donald Trump and Paul Kagame. And it's very interesting for me to reveal to you today that in 1994, you had what you call the Rwandan genocide. Okay, they call it the Rwandan genocide. And if I say it was not a genocide, they will say I'm a denialist. But 800,000 people were slaughtered by the very man who is in power today, and who also followed his own country people and countrymen and women within the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the eastern side, and killed and took the skulls and brought that back in Kigali to create today what they call the memorial of the genocide of Rwanda, which they go and celebrate every single year in April. But some of those skulls were taken from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to Rwanda. And the gentleman there, and we'll see maybe my brother Karabinchon will develop about that. What did he do? He created a policy, a strategy that we call Ubwenge. Ubwenge that is prevailing until today. It's a way to lie. Let's go and negotiate peace deal, which started in Arusha while Habyarimana was still the president. While they were negotiating, he was committing atrocity for an hegemonic war to seize a portion of the land of the Congo today. And these are things that are well known, but there's a omerta and silence about what is happening in the Congo. I've given it my own name, which I will reveal at the end of this session. Why? Because nobody want to talk about it. Now, this gentleman, Paul Kagame, in 1997, agreed with the head of the state, Laurent Désiré Kabila, who was at that time a rebel from the time of Mobutu. And it is very important that I mention Mobutu here, because Mobutu was an agent of the CIA. Whoever is familiar with what we call the Cold War, so the CIA has been in Africa ever since 1960, which we call the Cold War. And this is a very interesting book to read for those that are here, because it speaks about the CIA in Africa, that's the subtitle. But these 650 pages are all about the war in the Congo. And Mobutu replaced Joseph Kasavubu, who was the former president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the prime minister of the Congo in 1960 was nonetheless the hero of Africa, whom we call Patrice Emery Lumumba. And Patrice Emery Lumumba could be the front runner of the likes of Thomas Sankara, the likes of Traoré today in Burkina Faso, the country of the upright men. And this is what we are missing in Africa. Those men and women that can stand for this continent. So 650 pages of the CIA in Africa, and the only country that helped us during that time was Ghana. Now, Mobutu was replaced by Laurent Désiré Kabila, but Laurent Désiré Kabila was also the secretary to Patrice Emery Lumumba. So when he advanced in the Congo with the agenda and the support of Paul Kagame, Yuri Museveni, and all these Eastern Africa countries, it meant well for them, but to seize power, and after that, he changed his mind and he wanted the independence of the Congolese people. Hence, he was also killed like Patrice Emery Lumumba. Strange enough, until today, we don't have any inquest or trial for his death. In irony, and in Latin, etu quoque filimi. And you're also my son. And who replaces Laurent Désiré Kabila? It is the so-called biological son. And until today, I said it in the media here, around about 2012, 2011, on one of the channels, until there is a DNA test to prove whether he is the true son of Kabila, the Congolese will continue to claim that he is not the true son of Laurent Désiré Kabila, because he has never defended the Congo in the same way Patrice Emery Lumumba did, in the same way Joseph Kasavubu did, but instead he was there to protect the interest of the plunderer of the Congo, that are the United States and several multinational companies. I've been in the media for quite some time, and I worked for CNN and BBC back then in 1990. So during the removal of Mobutu, it was very key to me to learn some of the things that when the international community asked Mobutu to leave the space for the Rwandan who were refugees to come in, they threatened to remove him, and Mobutu did so, but to the expense of the Congolese people. So millions and millions, close to 2 million Rwandan people entered in the Congo. But the bottom line at that time is the Kofi Annan. This is the story most people don't know. Kofi Annan was the General Secretary of the UN, had a personal feud with one of our ambassadors at the UN, Gerard Kamanda. And because of that, it allowed the Rwandans to come in the Congo, and they were killed. So Joseph Kabila seized power and made deal with the Chinese. After making the deal with the Chinese, the deal is about 6 billion in US dollar. 6 billion in US dollar. And this for the minerals of the Congo. And those minerals, you know, today we're talking about the 4th and 5th generation. 2010 was actually the phones, and not only the phones, but most of the gadgets that we see in the world, including the plane and the rocket that goes onto the moon, needs the minerals that are in the Congo. But here we are talking about the tungsten, the coltan, that are key and important for our technology. And this reminds me that I have forgotten something, and to ask this question. Who ended the war, the Second World War? Who ended the Second World War? In 1945. Any idea?
They will say the American office.
Yes? The Soviet Union. Okay. Another response?
The USA.
The USA. And how did they end that war?
After the atomic bombing.
After the atomic bombing. And where does the atomic bomb come from? From?
Congo.
From Congo. Thank you. So there's a mine in the Congo. That mine is the uranium. And most of these products are rich in tenor. And the uranium in the Congo is very rich in tenor. So it comes from a mine that is called Chinkologwe. You can Google Chinkologwe, which is the missing link in the Second World War. And that mine at Chinkologwe, until today, that piece of land does not belong to the Congolese people. It belongs to the United States of America. And it is at the core of what we call the Cold War. Because the USA didn't want Russia to take control of the uranium in the Congo. So you see that from that time of 1885, 1945, 1960, Congo is the pivotal controller of the world. Who owns the Congo owns the world. Rightly so. Frantz Fanon, you know Frantz Fanon? Frantz Fanon said Africa has the shape of a revolver where the trigger is placed on the Congo. So, from 1993 to 2003, 6 million people were killed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's still not a genocide. It is being said that per minute, young ladies, one mother lady was raped in the Congo, which was actually rape as a weapon of war. 1.25 million children were children soldiers between that space of time, 1993 to 2003. 3 million Congolese were internally displaced, but today we are about 8 million that are internally displaced. So just from that space of time, then they called for the inter-Congolese dialogue in 2002 and 2003, which happened here in South Africa in what was called Sun City. But the irony of the matter is that during that inter-Congolese dialogue, it was not only the Congolese who were negotiating. We also had the Rwandan Tutsi people who were part of the inter-Congolese dialogue, who were advancing their Ubwenge agenda until today. We call that the strategy of the salami. So, what happened that after that in 2010, we had the mapping report who was speaking about the atrocities occurring in the Congo. 550 pages, 617 atrocities and violation of human rights. Some years ago, we organized an exhibition here where in 2015, I guess, young children, young men in the heart of Kinshasa were buried alive, 450 in Maluku. We have a survivor here in the Congo, but he lives in the Haiti, here in South Africa. In 1999, 34 women were also buried alive in Mwenga. This does not ring the bell. And at this point of time, what I usually do when I give those conferences, in memory of these people before I proceed, I would convene and convey and ask and plead with you that we stand for a minute of silence for all the dead people in the Congo. Thank you very much. So, 6 million people killed. Today, as Congolese, we speak about 18 million. Some people argue that it's more than 18 million people that have been killed in the Congo from 1993 to today. So 20 million today, 15 million from King Leopold II, 40% from the so-called slavery trade. Sometimes we do not realize, we speak about money. I hate talking about money. I dislike talking about money. I dislike talking about minerals because we tend to forget that what is more important, it is us as human beings. in this world. Without us, even these minerals mean nothing. So, back onto the history, it's very important that we realize that we had people who fought for the Congo. So, we had Simon Kimbangu, 1887, who was a prophet, more like Credo Mutwa in this country, who said, let not my country die. And today, I would like to say, let not our continent, Africa, die. Paul Panda Farnana, who created the very first political party in the Congo, Kimpa Vita, who was burnt alive, Patrice Emery Lumumba, he was born on the 2nd July, and Pierre Mulele, and this person is very important for me because he's my great uncle, who was also like Steve Biko in this country because he spoke about black consciousness, but the Congolese consciousness. Move forward, please. So what are the drivers of the current situation? Since 2010, as I was saying earlier on, there has been a mapping report, but this mapping report has never taken into consideration to try those who have committed the atrocities in the Congo until this very day. In fact, they are very silent. I can remember the UN General Secretary when he was asked a question about the current insurgency of the M23, how can the biggest peace mission not combat those? He said, we don't have the machinery, the guns. We don't have the means to go and combat the M23. How ironic. The biggest peace mission, 1 billion per year, 20 years in a country, no peace. And I've never seen any peace that they brought in any country whatsoever. So, for 20 years, the UN has been there as a peacekeeping mission, but no peace. And what is at stake? It's still the minerals, because this M23, with the current AFC, they are plundering the minerals there, and they take those minerals, and it makes a chain, it goes to Kigali, and from Kigali, it is distributed in the rest of the world. No wonder that today you have Doha in Qatar that is among the peace negotiators. But what is Doha? It is just a proxy of the United States of America, alongside some other countries in that region. So it is the card of money that is being played. And guess what? The war every year generates 19 trillion in US dollars. You can go and check for the index of peace in the media. So, $19 trillion for the war every year. How much would the peace cost? It means that 19 trillion US dollar would be for peace, but nobody want to bring the peace either in the Congo or in the rest of the world where we have conflict, because war benefits the people. So, from 1885, as I say, we have been fighting for justice. Our former leaders have fought for justice, but we have kept under silence. And even here in this country, we are prisoners. We live in a cage, because when I speak openly, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow to me. Some of my colleagues know here, about 2 months ago, I was nearly kidnapped by, and I was even scared to come here, mademoiselle. I didn't want to come at the last minute, because 2 months ago, I was kidnapped. And I said, is it worth it going and speaking in the open when we are not protected? Because this international community, the UN, do not protect us as human rights defenders. So, for me, I would ask you to go and watch those videos, Crisis in the Congo and Covering the Truth. And the second one is My Congo, My Story, which is an exhibition that we did some years ago, 6 years ago. And during that exhibition, we took survivors that are here in South Africa that mainly fled the eastern side of the Congo from Kivu and came to seek refuge here. But are we really in refuge here? Are we protected? You would know that most of the Congolese that are living in South Africa are not refugees. They are asylum seekers. You would be fortunate if you have a refugee status in this country. And this is important because we can't fight for our rights when you are an asylum seeker. And the reason is simple. Most of the people who were at the UNHCR were from the eastern side of Africa. I've worked for them, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, are those people that were working in the UNHCR. And the minute you say, I'm from Congo, I ran from war, I fled the war, they're not going to give you a refugee status. And those that they give the refugee status are mainly from Rwanda, who claim to be Congolese, like our former president. So, we are claiming to own our lands. Unfortunately, it is very difficult for us to own our land because the country has been infiltrated from 1996 by the Nilotic Rwandan people. I dislike talking about nationalities and tribes, but today, when I stand here, it will be difficult for me not to speak about tribes when I know that this gentleman, and I put it straightforward, this gentleman comes to my house and rapes my wife. And I must applaud. And I say continue, because that is what has been happening. Joseph Kabila came in our country and bled our country, and today is, according to Forbes, the richest man in Africa, after Ali Dangote. But we know where Ali Dangote got his wealth. And this is, you can read it. And he has created a network in the southern Africa, here, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, where he can come and give talks and people listen to him when he has killed himself some of our colleagues that were human rights activists. So, 160 years of disgrace in the Congo. 106 years of a disgrace from the Berlin Conference until today. We are slaves on our own land. I hear about land and expropriation in South Africa, right? But you don't know what is happening in the Congo. The wealth that is there, that has been estimated in terms of 350 trillion in US dollars, does not belong to us. It belongs to multinationals. And it is very important that what we need to do today is to thank you, the University of Johannesburg and these departments of economics for inviting us here and talk about Mama Congo. And I say it is not the genocide in the Congo. As I said, and I would open the debate because I can't be talking, my friend is here, gonna talk about the issue in Kivu, and if questions arise, I will respond to them. I don't speak about the genocide in the Congo. Rather, I speak about the Congo side. and the Congo side, we cry in silence and we die in silence. Not from 1996, but from the time of the creation of the Congo. So it's time that we appreciate, and I would appreciate the Congo Solidarity Campaign for inviting me to have some words with you, and the University of Johannesburg, and Dr. Naifa for inviting us for this. And I will stop here. There's a lot that I can talk about, but I think this is in a nutshell what is most important. At the core of our life is humanity. We speak about Ubuntu, and this is the time for us to share that Ubuntu, just for listening to us, our cries for those many years. Thank you so much.
I think before I hand it over, something that stood out for me, and I think I can open it to the floor as well, is the fact that, for instance, here in South Africa growing up, whenever I hear about what's happening in the Congo, immediately the two countries that are put forward is Rwanda and Uganda, rightfully so. But there is a silence as well to the other countries that have stood by and allowed it to happen. And one of the things that stand out for me is the fact that we speak, I guess, about Pan-Africanism. And one of the institutions that have put that forward is the African Union. But then the silence that follows it, I think it reverberates what you were saying, to say that war is more beneficial than helping stop that. And so I guess my question to you then would be, what is the implication of the geopolitical status of specifically South Africa? Recently we've heard of the 14 soldiers that were killed, and it's being weaponized to put South Africa in a position where we retract from what is happening in the Congo. And so please speak and educate us on how the silence from other neighboring countries who are indirectly helping the war, happen, also affect the refugees who are displaced here.
Thank you so much, and I'll delve on that issue with this saying. Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher, says that to speak about truth sometimes is costly. And if you open just John Bwasa on the media, I've spoken about it. Now, with your question, in the troops of in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the SADC troops, and I'm going to say SADC because it was not just South African troops. We had people from Namibia, we had people, soldiers from Angola, Malawi, lately Malawi, Tanzania, but between 1998 to 2003, there were 14 countries in Africa, from Africa, that were involved in the war in the Congo. And it was called the First Congo War and the Second Congo War for a reason, the Africa War. Now, in terms of the belligerents, we had the Southern African troops that were for the Congo, the government of that time, that was Laurent Désiré Kabila, and we had the Eastern countries of Africa that were for Rwanda, with the rebels. Now, but each of these countries, and this is very important, if you go into the pre-negotiation of the inter-Congolese dialogue, you'll see that some of these countries were not protecting the people of the Congo, they were protecting their mineral interest in the Congo. I know for a fact that the crocodile, Mr. Mnangagwa, was in the mining sector of the Bakwanga, where the Liba is, and he brought on the late Robert Mugabe the policy how to monopolize the diamond in the Congo. We know for a fact that there are some leaders in Africa that are implicated in the looting of the Congo. I could name Obasanjo of Nigeria, and rightly so, some of the projects how to take control of the minerals in the Congo were done by some of his advisors who were in some of these institutions, the alma mater where we are here. In Wits, in UJ, in ISA. So it's important that, and that's what I'm saying, thank you to this academia that you are rethinking the economics of Africa. So we're implicated, they were not there to protect the Congolese people, they were there to protect the mineral interest. If you take, have you ever heard about Kibali gold? Who knows Kibali gold? Okay. So Kibali gold is one of the greatest mines in Africa where gold, and I'm talking about pure gold, is being mined. And I remember Mark Bistro, one of the 22 richest men in the world, the day they took the first lingot of war, he danced the mutwash. Why? It happens to be that war in the Congo benefits the elite, not the people. And unless we stop that war, we're not going to go anywhere, because the trouble in the Congo brings the refugees here, the asylum seekers here. How many are we as Congolese here? We don't know. And I was discussing with Dr. Naifa earlier on. They speak about 110 million Congolese. From what? Because from 1984 to my knowledge, we have never had a census in the Congo. Let alone do we have a registry in the Congo to say so many were born this year and so many died this year. So we don't actually know how many we are in the Congo. To your question, just the solidarity. Because all these countries in Africa, I don't mention the African Union. We call it African Union. I call it a toothless bulldog. I've said it on the media and I'm going to repeat it. We don't have an African Union. And the Pan-Africanism, all those who were Pan-Africanists, the true ones were killed. We have some people that call themselves Pan-Africanists, but they aren't. They wear their ties. I'm sorry I'm wearing a tie. I was trying to see, what am I going to wear today? Should I be an African or should I be a Métis, a mulatto? And I decided to be a mulatto. Okay? So let's gear together the University of Johannesburg and the people of the Congo to try to create the momentum, the driver for peace in the Congo and peace in the world. Because without peace, there's nothing we can do.
Please allow me to give you names. Because when you don't know the names, then you are in a limbo. This is a list that was published in Congo. Some of the mines, right, or mines that the government has recovered. Here are the names. You have the Congolese themselves, those who ruled, who were with Joseph Kabila, some are with Tshisekedi. You have Africans, you have Europeans, you have Americans. This is the list. Number 1, Joseph Kabila, the former president of Congo. Martin Kabwelelu, Albert Yuma, Moïse Katumbi. Moïse Katumbi, you know for sure. The other 2 are people who were involved in GKB. Moïse Katumbi is one of those so-called opposition, is on the list. You have Janet Kabila. Janet Kabila was introduced as the twin sister. Finally, it's not twin sister, it's the auntie to Kabila. Zoe Kabila is supposed to be the brother to Joseph Kabila. And then many members of Joseph Kabila's political party, FCC. And then you have Jean-Marc Kabound. Jean-Marc Kabound is one of leaders who came into power with Tshisekedi. He is on the list. Then in Africa, Paul Kagame is number one, the list in Africa. Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. Robert Mugabe family, not just one person. Thabo Mbeki. And you will understand why he tried this so-called dialogue, second inter-dialogue Congolese sometimes ago. He is on the list. Jacob Zuma, even our Jacob Zuma is on the list. Olusegun Obasanjo, my friend told you already. Denis Sassou Nguesso, the president of Congo-Brazza. Faustin Archange Touadéra. William Ruto. William Ruto is the president of Kenya. Outside Africa, who do we have? Louis Michel. Louis Michel is European Union.
He's from Belgium.
Belgium. And we have many members of Clinton family and the Democrats in America. So everybody is helping himself in Congo. So it's not a Congolese problem. It is an African problem. You remember Africa said, if South Africa is not free, then Africa is not free. It is the same today. If Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is not free, Africa is not free. Because 70% of the world, the entire earth is coming from, is in Congo. So if Africans can understand that and come together, just as all these people came together to plunder, if Africans can come together and save Congo, and then it's the African Renaissance. If not, they are going to carry on. Because you understand, Africa, America, Europe, everybody is helping himself. So that is our plea, that you understand and not treat it as a Congolese problem. No, it's an African problem. Thank you.
I think I'll just make commentary and throw a question to the audience, whoever would like to answer. In everything that has been mentioned till now, the one thing that I keep on thinking about, and it brings me back to another conversational panel discussion I was a part of, when we were discussing issues in South Africa and the value of institutions and the need to evaluate whether institutions really serve us or they serve other people's interests. And so when you speak about how there is no African unity, it goes back to the question of what is the value of institutions? Coming back again to the crisis of the asylum seekers in South Africa, one must question why there is so much backlog in granting people who are fleeing from war status within to fight for their rights. And then you take a look at the geopolitical status and you question the intention behind wanting to help. One of the names that have been implicated is our former president, Thabo Mbeki, and so you start to really question the intention behind it. So I would like to ask everyone, are institutions still valuable? Do they serve us? I'm not too sure.
Hi, my name is Benjamin. I'm a Congolese student at the University of Johannesburg. To answer your question about the institution, I think when you think about the African Union that is founded by the European Union, you understand who they're serving, right? When since 2002 now, it's been 23 years that the institution exists, but they're still founded by the European Union. So you see that when you are founded by someone, it basically means that you depend on them, on your finances, and you bring their narrative. And to speak about the asylum seeker in South Africa and Thabo Mbeki, in 2003, I don't know if it was mentioned, I came a bit late, the Sun City Conference was one of the conferences that brought peace in Congo and bring us to getting our next president, was Joseph Kabila in 2003, and they had the all 4+1, which was the rebel group with Joseph Kabila leading the country for 3 years and then getting to election. I'm just gonna briefly say that. So basically the Sun City Conference was held in South Africa, right? And that's what brought peace in Congo after the Second War of Congo, right? So when you look at the fact that he was the president at the time, so it's just a question and a thought that I had recently is what was his implication in Sun City and what was discussed and what were the agreements in that moment? Because if you sign an agreement and after that you basically plunder the minerals and sign an agreement to share the Congo within African countries, I think it's something that we need to think about when we speak about institution. What are the role of institution and African institution? Because we had SADC, as he mentioned, that was fighting, but they had to drive his troops. So what the role of those even regional institutions? So we really need to question what do we need those institutions and what are the roles and who are they accountable to? Because when you have an African institution that depends on the European Union, it's already a problem because you're not financially free, which means that you basically depend on the European Union that has a lot of benefit from Congo. And if you recall or if you saw on social media during, I believe it's February, when the Goma, when the rebels took the city of Goma, there was, there's actually, European Union is the first trader with Rwanda, right? So they're the first client of Rwanda when it comes to minerals. And if that's the institution that found the African Union, you can already see that there's a link in everything. So I believe that we need to really rethink, as the institutions calls, rethink even not only economics, but even the institution in Africa. Who do they serve, and is it serving us? And the fact that we're not even informed about the war in Africa, but more informed about other political issues like Ukraine and all the other things happening in the world, just shows that there's a narrative that has been sold to Africans that we should not, we shouldn't help each other, we shouldn't know about each other's issues, but we should fight each other. And you mentioned the asylum seekers. Today, with all the Dudula thing, where they're killing people, they're not letting people get into hospitals, that's only for black people and African asylum seekers. We don't see white people in this thing, we don't see other nationalities, right? It's easier to fight those who are quote-unquote inferior, right? Vulnerable, exactly. So I think it's important that we think about those things. Why do we only have a problem when it comes to foreigners who are black and African and not others? Yeah.
I also think, just to add on his point of institutions being dependent on the European Union, seeing as the AU was built on the European Union. Not only are we dependent financially, but if we think back to, he mentioned Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon mentioned something of the national middle class. And in addition to the national middle class, he also spoke about how the psychological effects of colonization and everything had on black people on their own. And that bore the national middle class, which are black people who try to fit into the Western side. And right now, the national middle class are the people who own the institutions. So our institutions as a whole are mainly based on Western doctrines. So our policies are also made out of Western doctrines. So from the beginning, institutions were not created to serve the African people, but were created to serve the doctrines of the West. That's how neocolonialism is still having an effect over how Africans live their lives, because from the get-go till now, institutions were not built on serving the interests of African people, but were built from the national middle class, and internally the national middle class have already embraced the notion psychologically of being aligned with the West. So unless the mentality changes, which is not going to happen with the national middle class, because you can already see that it's elderly people. So unless a new generation of a different perspective rises, then institutions can possibly change. But until then, if the national middle class remains there, then institutions are not necessarily going to change, because the doctrines, the policies, everything is built on Western doctrines, even the language that we're speaking now, English. So it's not ours to begin with, it's theirs. And in terms of asylum seekers, I saw it from a perspective of, if they are granted refugee status, then they are able to, then they are given a voice. And seeing as how so many African states are benefiting from the war, a voice that is going to stand against the war is something that they all are avoiding. Hence, it is so rare and it is so hard for refugees who are fleeing from the war to receive refugee status, because then they'll be able to stand against the injustice. But seeing as they're giving asylum seekers, meaning they are legally binding them to silence already. And yeah, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Aloj. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Benjamin from Congo, so that's campaign. And I'm very glad to be under this institution, really to this meeting conversation today, which UK organized. I may say that with the first time with the Congolese, because the meeting which has been organized, Congolese never have time to speak on their behalf. I heard you when you spoke about a few people, especially by Tabundeki and others, and when Mama spoke about Ruto and others. Remember that the conflict which is happening in DRC is not a DRC conflict like my leaders say, but it is an African conflict which in the future will routine entire Africa if the new generation cannot be aware. Because since DRC have been in bordering system with Rwanda, we have been friends, neighbors. But the system which has been implemented in Rwandese due to what has been the reason to colonize our Africa has been diverted by our mentor parents, Emery Patrice Lumumba and others, those who saw far what will come after years. So when the colonialists saw the minds and the vision of those people who would be the former leaders, and how the colonialists have been chased out from Africa, where they saw better to put their legacy in the world. So they decided to divert the system of Africans in the how by rooting other leaders, neighbors, minds, and psychologists, so they can reach those countries which they targeted. Reason why in the years past, Africa was colonized until Africans was taken out from Africa to out of the continent by the old system. But now, since they saw that that system has been known by Africans and some Africans have been awake, they changed the strategy to recolonize Africa by using the same Africans, so the Africans cannot be aware that the nationalists are the ones who are colonizing now Africa. But remember that the problem which is in DRC, soon or after soon, it will affect the entire Africa, if we can say, looking to what is happening in Kenya, when Ruto is the chairman or the president of the country. Remember what is happening in South Africa now. There is a so-called divide to rule. the VAT rule is a system which just be on the high position they are using, so Africans we can be divided and be ruled for our benefit, what we support to benefit in the future, don't be benefit of us. And if we are not to be awake as Africans, that is what Congolese Soldat campaign is bringing this outcalling to the new generation of Africa. Let us be united and let us build our mother Africa by starting to take out the rotten tomatoes. Unfortunately, if Mr. Thabo Mbeki had been the mentor of our former president, so-called Kabila, and we are not even ashamed to say that the problem which Congo is facing, South Africa may be one of the sources. And if we may know that South Africa may be used by not knowing what South Africa will be in the future to come back to where they was, it will be a mess up. But let us wait and be together so we can bring the barrier to what is happening if we want to watch the film. Thank you so much.
Something that keeps popping in songs.
Thank you. And thank you for the really interesting and amazing talk. My name is Abdullah, I'm from Palestine. I just wanted to add a very minor point onto what my brother down there and my sister over here said earlier about institutions, which is in addition to, that this is where they get their funding from, these are kind of like the epistemologies that they base themselves on. I mean, also the rules are selective. We had this experience, right, in Palestine for the last 2 years, this escalated genocide that, has been going on. The ICC did its job. It issued an arrest warrant against the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Israel. In theory, when they traveled to different countries, they meant to be arrested. The UK made a very big deal about South Africa not arresting Omar al-Bashir, and the UK didn't arrest Isaac Herzog, So in addition to kind of these deeply held structural issues with the institutions, there's also just the fact that the rules are selective, And in that sense, I mean, I don't know even if we have such a thing as strong institutions, that if that's such a thing that exists in the world. And so that was just a minor contribution. Thank you.
Contribution actually adds to my other query that I have for everyone in the audience. Whenever we look at institutions and the value and growth of institutions, for instance, the one that we're currently sitting in, you begin to question how we create knowledge and how it's passed down. So for instance, a lot of things that have been mentioned here, I'm hearing it for the first time, and it should be embarrassing as a university student who has experiences and is engaging with international students. How is it possible for us not to know about these things? And so again, it goes without saying to say that as much as you are seated in these positions where we are able to have these conversations, and hopefully they don't stop here, and hopefully we are not just saying that we're standing in solidarity and that we're actually doing the work, one must also reevaluate how we are producing the knowledge in and of itself. Because at a point in which we are going to sit here, then go back to our classes, but not question how there are underlying factors that are prohibiting us from educating ourselves on this. I mean, today I woke out that, guys, all the representatives in the state of the United States of America, are in Israel, and they're planting flags to stand in solidarity with the genocide. We are all on social media, but the biggest news reporters are not saying anything. And it comes back again to the war in Congo. They're not saying anything. And yet, most of us are using iPhones. Where are they getting the resources to create that? An interesting fact that I found out was the fact that one of the reasons why Donald Trump is pushing so much to bully South Africa to retract the case against Israel is the fact that Israel is one of the most important components to the manufacturing of iPhones, then you look at the components that create the iPhones and it comes back to Congo. And so, yeah,
I'd like to touch on this, and I'm very much fascinated by the fact that you use the word knowledge, rather than, but at the same time you use the word educating. And there's a word that I would like to bring to the light of everyone here. Educating, I go back to education, but what is the meaning of education? If I look at it onto the ontological spectrum, in Latin, educare means to bind forth. Henceforth, it is to indoctrinate, to enslave. And some of you have mentioned the fact that the systems that we are talking about have enslaved us, not today, but from perennial time, to such an extent that we are enabled to think African. Another aspect that I would say, we must not always blame the international community as well as the outsider. I call them the outsider. But we must blame ourselves to allow to have a failure in our leadership, those that are governing us, those that are supposedly ruling us, and allowing them to manipulate us. And I think it is about time. We have seen it with Nepal recently, where the people have said, enough is enough. And including here in South Africa, there's a point of time when you say, hey, it has reached this place, I can't breathe anymore, I'm suffocating. And I was recently in the big debate when we were talking about the new dispensation and the current dialogue in South Africa. And I was sitting with an Israeli, a Jew, friend of Palestine. 3 days later, I got a call from the people asking me, who invited you there? And I said, what's the point? I'm a human rights activist. I can stand anywhere. So the fact that I'm standing for the victims of Palestine doesn't mean that you have to pull the string from me. And as I said, 2 months ago, they nearly kidnapped me. So what is important, my dear, is the solidarity that we are advocating for. And that solidarity will bring the light, because in our understanding, this environment, the alma mater, the mountain, as we say in the Congo, that's where we go to get the wisdom, and wisdom is knowledge. And the knowledge that we get from here, let's impact to others. 1 candle, 2 candles, 3 candles, and tomorrow it will be a movement throughout Africa for us to become like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Because they do not have today to rely on the Western people for their own economy. In fact, they are thriving. Let's make this continent thrive so that tomorrow our children, I'm 60, and our grandchildren are free from the bondage of colonization. Somebody mentioned the language that we are using. Okay? Guess the irony. Rwanda speaks English, but the head of the so-called Francophonie, so the French-speaking country, comes from Rwanda. But the country that has got the population that speaks the best French, the Congolese, does not even have a secretary of Francophonie. But Rwanda speaks English, they are the head of the Francophonie. And that's how, when we contest, we are being killed. So let's get together. Mama Nassif, I'm sorry to call you Mama, but that's how I call all the ladies, because I never had a mom. I sucked the rivers of the Congo. That's where I was breastfed, from the river of the Congo, not from a mother. So let's make this department be the first to allow us to start a movement from here and walk, even a march for peace from here to Pretoria, and say this is the time to build the peace in Africa, in South Africa. Because the reality is, it is the have against the have-nots. That's all. The have against the have-nots. Yet they have, they are 1%, they have not, we are billion. But what are we doing?
I think I'll just seek one question or comment and then
The way he died, we all are aware that there were some insiders, there were some internal factors that led to his death and things like that. So how do we ensure that political leadership in Congo going forward is something that's sustainable and not influenced by not just the tribal divisions, but the divided loyalties of people in Congo? And we know, first of all, that some of the leaders we've had have not even been Congolese leaders, they've just been plants of people who serve the incentives of Western powers. But among the Congolese themselves, wherever you find them, there's a culture of disunity. There's a culture of not wanting to work together to progress. Even those who come from institutions of knowledge outside of Congo and return to the DRC, there are many young people now who studied in China and South Africa and America, wherever, and they love Congo, they went back. They didn't say, I'm going to stay wherever I am and build my wealth. They went back and they are there, and they are frustrated by how difficult it is to make anything work. In fact, you start trying to make things work, you get poisoned. You start actually doing your job, things happen to you that makes it so that there's something about, I don't know why it's like we hate our country. I don't know how to explain. There is no, I've heard, I grew up in South Africa, but I hear stories from cousins who grew up and studied in Congo and whatnot. And they have experiences where it's jokes, but even the children know it. Like if you get into political leadership, steal for yourself and your family, and then afterwards and whatnot. So the attitude that we have towards the love for Congo is there, but it doesn't manifest itself in the political will to actually make a difference. So how do we ensure that democracy works in Congo? Because as it seems right now, we speak about external institutions, but in Congo, do we have a single institution of reputation that we can say we built for ourselves? Because we're not asking for help outside, we're pleading and all the things, but as you've given us a detailed history of everything that's gone on, there's no incentive for them to change. They haven't been stealing for 500 years tomorrow to go with conscience and be like, what we've been doing is wrong. And asking for solidarity and help from outside is something that we're hoping they can come. But the driving engine for the change will only at the end of the day be the Congolese. So how do we make it so that there's solidarity among Congolese people, inside Congo, outside Congo, wherever we find ourselves, is something that allows for us to have a country that's actually functional and stable, and a place from which we can garner respect and not find ourselves outside and then being treated as if we're not human. It doesn't matter where we go, we start asking, we start begging, we start negotiating with the world for dignity. How do we end that? How do we find ourselves in a place where we are very proud, but we've got nothing to be proud about in terms of reputation in the way that things are going now. So how do we do that?
Thanks so much. And I think I'm going to respond from this very platform. You see the gentleman there behind you? Rafael, that one. Mama there. Mama, okay. And my friend here, I saw Papa there, and both of them, and Benjamin that is there. So there's another Benjamin there. So, and Mama Fatima. To respond to that question, I think you are talking about disunity, okay? Or the lack of unity. If I look at these people and I talk about the tribes, because that's where we are. There are, how many tribes are there in the Congo, if you know? 300. 450 tribes in the Congo. 450 tribes, which makes 450 languages.
Yes.
Okay? Now, and this was documented by a scientist, Jean Vancina, who is a sociologist. And the five of us here, we come from different backgrounds. They come from the eastern side of the Congo. I come from the west. They come from the southwest. So, The Congo are united. I'm telling you this. But the problem is those who came from outside, who were implanted within the Congo from 1910, because I could not dwell into history. 1910, that's the very first flights that came from Rwanda for colonization. They brought Rwandan in the Congo in Likasi and they put them there. And these are the people that are dividing the Congo. And from 1960, when Mobutu came into power, we had another person who was Barthélemy Bisengimana, and he was the head of the cabinet for Mobutu Sese Seko. And they created what we call today, you have heard of the former President Thabo Mbeki talking about the Banyamulenge, that we are not accepting the Banyamulenge, which is untrue, because we have been living with these people from 1910 until the so-called Rwandan genocide. And they come and create havoc, they come and kill us. They even had the presidency for 18 years. So the divide to rule is there today for us not to unite, but the only way to do it is the way we've been doing. I think I've been with this mama for 20 years, 10 years with the gentlemen behind you. They lead their organization. I've got my organization. You haven't heard me mentioning my organization because I was invited by them. The only way to promote one another, I've been invited by them, and I acknowledge the Congolese Solidarity Campaign with whom I have worked, with which I have worked for so many years, including, Mama, we went to Zirestan to save our brothers who were victims of xenophobia. I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about xenophobia because next week I'm talking about it. There's no xenophobia. There's no fear of the other. The problem is philophobia. Philophobia. Philo, love, phobia, fear. The fear of love. We have been trained not to love ourselves, to undermine ourselves, to belittle ourselves. That's the reason for which we are here, because we are each of us in his own prison. It's Peter and Paul. And whenever Peter and Paul are in their prison, they are afraid to see that they can liberate themselves. So Peter must liberate himself, and Paul must liberate himself for us to come together. And we'll find the way as Africans to liberate the Congo. For now, we think that we are all in an insular planet, but yet not. Congo is at the center of the universe. We call it the egregore of the world. If we liberate Congo today, the entire Africa is free, and the world itself is free from the domination of the 1% that are ruling the world.
Unfortunately, due to the constraints of time, we have come to the end of the event, which is quite ironic because war doesn't know time. The war is still actively happening, but I think this is one step closer to perhaps finding change, creating change. Perhaps we're even sitting amongst people who are going to become future leaders. But yes, thank you so much, Mr. Jean. Thank you so much for the other organizations who have come to enlighten us. Thank you all for coming to our event. From myself, and thank you so much, Dr. Ishii, for your help. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I think let's give them a round of applause. So now that we've come to the end of the event, we do have refreshments, but can we all remain seated until we serve our guests, and then everyone can sort of come. And if you guys have any questions, they're still here to answer your questions. If you have queries about any organization, you can also still come. Thank you all.
Merci beaucoup. Asante sana. Mungu akubariki. Amacheroni. Sabulela, sabonga raku.